The 8th of March 2014. At 12:42 in the morning, Malaysian Airlines Flight MH370 took off from Kuala Lumpur. This flight was headed to Beijing. There were 227 passengers on this flight, 10 flight attendants and 2 pilots flying this plane. Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, 53 years old, one of the senior-most captains in Malaysian Airlines, highly experienced. And First Officer Farid Hamid, 27 years old, it was a training flight for him. After completing this training flight, he would have been fully certified to become a pilot. This flight flies in the correct direction for about 20 minutes. But at 1:08 in the morning, this flight crossed the Malaysian coastline and reached above the South China Sea in the direction of Vietnam. Zahari reported that the plane was at 35,000 feet. Everything was running normally. About 11 minutes later, the airplane entered the jurisdiction of the Vietnamese air traffic. That's why the air traffic control of Kuala Lumpur radios the airplane saying, Malaysian 370, contact Ho Chi Minh 120.9. Good night. Captain Zahari answered by saying, good night, mass 370. Everything sounds normal, and it was normal till this point in time. But these words by Captain Zahari were the last words from this airplane. After this, there was no news from this flight. The Malaysian Airlines flight disappeared suddenly, and this became the biggest aviation mystery in the world.
Breaking news tonight, a Malaysia Airlines flight.
Malaysia Airlines Flight
MH370.
Flight MH370
disappeared en route to Beijing.
70, we are ready, requesting flight number 310 to Beijing. Malaysian 370.
Flight MH370 ended in the southern Indian Ocean.
Merely 30 seconds after entering the Vietnamese airspace, this plane disappeared from the radar suddenly. It was 1:21 a.m. in the morning. The air traffic control in Kuala Lumpur didn't notice this, and when they do, they think that the plane had flown out of the range of their radar and had entered Vietnam's airspace. So there's nothing unusual. On the other hand, the air traffic control in Vietnam saw that the MH370 entered their airspace but disappeared from their radar suddenly. They tried to communicate with the plane, but there was no response from the other side. After repeatedly trying for 18 minutes, Vietnamese controllers informed Kuala Lumpur that MH370 had disappeared suddenly. Generally, in such situations, Kuala Lumpur's Aeronautical Rescue Coordination Center should have been notified within 1 hour about the disappearance of the plane. But it was only after 4 hours had passed that an emergency response began. It was 6:32 in the morning. This was the time by when the airplane should have landed in Beijing, but it did not land. A search operation was called immediately. Efforts began to find the plane. If you look at the map, the plane was flying from Malaysia to Beijing. Vietnam lies in the middle, as well as the South China Sea. So obviously the search operation began in the South China Sea to look for the plane. This search operation was an international effort. 34 ships and 28 aircraft from 7 different countries tried to look for this plane that morning. But there was no trace of the plane. About 4 days later, on the 12th of March, it was reported that though the plane had disappeared from the civilian radar, but a military radar had spotted the plane that night. And surprisingly, according to this military radar, this plane was last seen at 2:22 in the morning, 2:22 a.m., but it wasn't located above the South China Sea. Rather, it was near the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, westward from Malaysia above the Strait of Malacca. And according to the readings of this military radar, this plane was flying north in the direction of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, the other way from Beijing. This news left everyone shocked. Where did this plane go? Did it fly towards India's direction and crash in the Himalayas or in Kazakhstan? Some more days later, a new piece of evidence was discovered from satellite data. It was found that the plane was trying to automatically communicate with a satellite. It is actually quite common. The large airplanes like the Boeing 777, they try to establish communication with satellites often to make their communication easier. It is the same as your phone trying to automatically connect to known Wi-Fi. It's similar. But the problem was that when this plane communicated with the satellite, it merely tried to log in, trying to establish a connection. No data was transmitted about the location of the plane. The satellite was simply aware that this plane tried to communicate, but nothing more about where the plane actually was. But some scientists and investigators thought to use this to approximate the location of the plane. They thought that when the satellite received the communication, the satellite would have moved its antenna towards the direction of the plane. So they took the angle of the antenna of the satellite to measure it and make calculations upon it, estimated the location of the plane. As I said earlier, the exact location couldn't be determined with the help of the satellite, but it could be used to estimate that this circle that you see in white color, the plane could be anywhere within this circle. When it tried to communicate with the satellite, the plane tried to establish communication with the satellite 7 times. That's why you can see 7 different circles in white color. These are known as satellite handshakes. Every circle shows the time when the plane tried to communicate with the satellite. The last circle here, the 7th circle, shows the latest time when the plane tried to communicate with the satellite. The last point where this airplane could have been, and it was really surprising because this circle was huge. It covers a lot of areas from Kazakhstan, China, Indonesia to Australia, and covering a vast ocean. The plane could be anywhere in the last circle, or perhaps further than this. This was the last point it tried to communicate. After this, the investigators did more calculations with the speed of the plane, the remaining fuel in the plane, and then estimated that the plane could be in this shaded area of the circle, on this arc of the circle. It was famously called the 7th arc. This 7th arc is 2,000 kilometers west of Australia and occupies a large expansive area. It was in such a part of the ocean that hasn't been explored much. On this map, you can see the location of the satellite that was used for the prediction. The outermost yellow dotted circle that you see is the range till which the plane could travel with its fuel, with a flight time of 7 hours. And the curved arc in red that you can see is the 7th arc, the place where the plane is assumed to have crashed. After this, several search operations were called. The yellow shaded regions show you the places where the search operations were conducted, and the orange area is the priority search area where the most number of search operations were conducted. By April 2014, the search operations on the surface of the ocean were stopped because it wasn't fruitful. Since the plane had crashed, it would have sunk into the ocean. It wouldn't be floating on the ocean's surface. And so deep ocean searches were being conducted. At this point in time, this was the largest and the most expensive search operation conducted. For weeks, months, and even years, they tried to look for the plane but didn't find anything. 3 years later, and after spending $160 million, they called off this operation. And this operation was deemed a failure. But there was one piece of good news amidst all of this. In July 2015, the first piece of debris was found from this plane. The debris reached the island of Reunion by floating. This island is in the east of Madagascar. The flaperon of the plane was found here. You can see it in the photo. It is a broken part from the plane. After this, in 2018, an American company, Ocean Infinity, signed a new contract with the Malaysian government. They wanted to conduct the search operations, and if they aren't able to find the plane, they wouldn't charge any fees. No fine, no fee. On this condition, they began a new search operation. They have highly advanced underwater surveillance vehicles. While conducting this search operation, they were mapping the ocean floor. And in this search operation, they found in the area of the 7th arc that there are several underwater volcanoes, several cliffs and mountains as well. They kept searching for months, but unfortunately, they failed in their mission too. They decided to run background checks on the passengers of the plane and a background check on the pilots of the plane to look for their history and whether someone tried to hijack the plane. After these investigations, some theories came forward about what could have happened to the plane exactly. Come, let's look at the theories and assumptions one by one. Either there'd be any electrical failure in the plane, or there'd be an accident, or there might be some technical failure in the plane, because of which the equipment stopped working. Or perhaps any passenger or pilot switched off the transponder manually, doing this intentionally. In the first theory, Captain Zahari Shah is being accused. It is being said that the captain intentionally disabled communication and took the plane and crashed it into the ocean. But what could be the reason for him to do this? Some people say that he may have not been in the right mental state. Some people believe he was suicidal. Some people claim that this was a result of hijacking, like a terror attack. But why is Zahari Shah actually being blamed here? There are some arguments that support this theory. To know it, subscribe for part 2.